Hello guys, so this is the first lesson of Unit 2, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the A section, which is about the hardware and software, and this is talking about computer system. Now a computer system is a computer, or rather a device, that can take in an input, do some processing, and provide an output. So many devices, other than what looks like a typical PC, can be classified as a computer system. You will see this as we go along. For example, a mobile phone can be classified as a computer system in the sense that it has an input, maybe in the form of a touch screen or a button, and then it does some processing, for example, whatever it is that you clicked on the button to do, and then it gives you an output to the screen. So anything that classifies within those things can be defined really as a computer system. So in this section we're going to be looking at some specific computer systems that's in your specification. The first one is talking about a multifunctional device. Now a multifunctional device could be one that embeds multiple functions of different devices into one. For example, we have an all-in-one printer that gives us a scanner, a photocopier, and maybe a fax. And so that will be a multifunctional device, because instead of having to buy each one of those, for example, having to buy a scanner, a printer, and then a photocopier separately, we can have a multifunctional device that really embeds all. So in the same vein, we can say a tablet or a smartphone is also a multifunctional device, in the sense that a smartphone would have embedded within it a camera. That camera can take stills, as in pictures, and also can take videos. So it would include the feature of a camcorder or a digital camera, and it would also include the features of a PC, because you can maybe type Word documents on it, you can browse the internet on it. So it has then the features of a PC, and then it also has other features. For example, a sat nav, it might have within it a GPS receiver, which would then allow you to be able to use it as a satellite navigation system as well. But multifunctional devices have within themselves limitations. Okay, so the limitation is that the features of that multifunctional device might be reduced in comparison to one that's dedicated. So let's take the example of a camera. The camera probably would have, as in a dedicated digital camera, will have a lens on it, which is known as a optical lens, and that way we can do an optical zoom. So when you move your the lens back and forth to be able to zoom into a picture, you'll be able to get a clearer and accurate picture. Whereas the camera embedded within a within a multifunctional device such as a tablet or a phone would be limited, because that would only have a digital zoom within it. So moving on to a personal computer. Now a personal computer is a computer that's used by a single person at any given point. An example would be a desktop computer, which is often used on a desk, which is why it's known as a desktop, or a laptop. Okay, so that's what personal computers are. What about a mobile device? Well, a mobile device is, as we already established, a mobile phone or tablets. And again, the good thing is they are portable, and they allow us to be able to store a certain amount of data on there, as well as having applications that we can run. Now a server is a more powerful computer, and it handles requests from a client. So a client will be a PC that's connected on a network, and then the server is what sends data back to that particular client. For example, we have different types of servers. We have a file server, where all your files are stored centrally. So in school, that will be a file server such as the share drive. And we can have a mail server where our emails are stored, a web server where web pages are stored, an application server where lots of programs are run from. Okay, so the interesting thing about a server is it has to have a high number of processing. So it has to have a fast CPU to be able to cope with all of the requests from the client. It has to have a good network capability to be able to transfer data back and forth on the network. It needs to have good strong operating system. But all of these content we'll cover as we go along. Right, so talking about multifunctional devices in a bit more. So a multifunctional device, as we mentioned, could embed a camera, MP3 player, a camcorder, sat nav on your mobile device. Right, they are compact and easy to carry around, and the benefit of that is that we don't have to buy multiple different devices to do one thing, because they can all be in one. Limitation, as we already mentioned, is that they don't give as much features, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the next lesson. Right, so in terms of the internal components of a PC, we have the motherboard, which is a printed circuit board, and on the motherboard is where we connect all the other devices. For example, the CPU, the RAM, every other device that's inside of a computer is connected onto the motherboard. That way they all get the what we know as a bus to be able to carry the data back and forth between those devices, and they also get power. And then we have the processor, which is the central part of the computer, which is often known as the brain of the computer, and that is where all of the fetching of instructions, the decoding, and the executing of instruction is done. Okay. Again, we'll talk a bit more about that in a future lesson. Then you would also have memory. Memory comes in two parts, which is RAM. RAM is random access memory. RAM is a form of volatile storage in the sense that we store things on it temporarily whilst the computer is running. And what gets stored into RAM is your program that you're currently running. So without RAM, you will not be able to multitask effectively, because your operating system itself gets stored into RAM when the computer is loaded. Likewise, your programs that are running all get stored into RAM. ROM is read-only memory, and this is a non-volatile form of storage, which means that when the power goes off, the content of ROM stays the same. And so because of that, ROM is used to boot up the computer. It loads what we know as the BIOS, of the computer, to be able to load it up. And RAM, as we said, the content is volatile, which means that when the power goes off, all the content gets lost. Right, other components are the disk drives in themselves. So we can have a what we know as a hard disk drive, and this stores large amounts of data on the computer, and they are fairly robust and cheap to buy in comparison to how much you are able to store, and very reliable. And we also have another form of storage that we can have as an alternative to a hard disk drive, and that's the solid state drive, abbreviated SSD. They are faster than the hard disk drive because they don't have any moving parts. Every content is stored on a microchip, a bit like a USB. And because of that, they are smaller in size. And so our mobile devices, such as a tablet and mobile phones, have SSDs in them because they are portable. So when we're moving them around, it doesn't get affected by the movement. We can also have optical drives such as CDs and DVDs that would allow us to be able to store movies and music and such like. And then also likewise we can have a storage device such as SD cards, as well as memory flash cards as well. And then on the computer we also have something called an expansion card on the motherboard, where you can connect more devices on the motherboard. For example, if I wanted to put a new graphics card onto my machine, I will put it onto a PCIe slot, and that would allow me to be able to have more connection or more devices in my computer. And then we also have ports, where you have a USB port, for example, at the back of your computer. So that covers that content. So here's an exam question that you can reflect on briefly. So it says there, David offers a customer. So this is related to a graphics designer. So the context of this exam question is that he's a graphics designer. So take a few minutes, have a look at the question here, and see if you can answer that 2-mark question. And now I'll just show you briefly the mark scheme. Answer. So the reason why we would use that is because we're using multiple programs, so we need a large amount of RAM. Because it's a graphics designer, it's going to need to be able to render lots of graphics. And then if we don't have enough RAM, it would affect the performance because there will be nowhere to store all of that content. Okay, so there's just some answers that you can have in your